I had the pleasure of meeting him at a conference just about 2 years ago at Spirit Rock in California, Larry Ward. And I was so taken by his, there were about 80 of us present that day, and he was one of prominent speakers that really captured my heart. He's just recently was part of a Black Buddhist summit that was that he spoke about America's racial karma, which is the title of his presentation with us today. And his is an interesting story. Larry is also from the Plum Village tradition. He's an ordained preacher. And I don't know, there's so much I could say about him in a short amount of time, but I'm sure he's going to have you off your feet. So, Larry, it's great. I told you one day I'd get you. And so it's so nice to have you with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Willie. It's my pleasure to be with you. I'm glad you got me. Maybe a long breath out for everyone as we begin. See if you can reach down into your lungs and let out all you've taken in. My name is Larry Ward. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm speaking to you today from the land of the Kumeyaay people, also known as the San Diego area. I'm speaking to you today from the ground of my own ancestors and their long journey of healing, transformation, and change, which is continuous. I brought with me today something from my in-laws' house, found many years ago in Wisconsin. I keep these chains, original chains, and handcuffs from slavery so I do not forget.
Child.
And these cuffs and chains were designed especially for children. I have a poem for you. It's called When I Became Currency. When they came for me, I tried to contain my fear and my heartbreak. My bones longed for home as I, sick in the bottom of a ship, became dark currency, carried over the seas. I was sold and sold again, a commodity, an instrument of profit, seduced and sustained by greed, arrogance, and ignorance. Cold and beleaguered in a new land unknown, I tried to forget such horror in my bones. But the looks and whispers, even to this day, remind me. I am a class of color created by a colonial mind, missing its own self-worth. But the dance of my ancestors in my bones have kept me awake and kept me alive. I live beyond such limiting constructs of mind. I am free because I am not confused. I am stardust awake. I am the earth and sky embracing all. I ride the wind with the eagle and the hawk. I flow with the rivers into all oceans. I touch the sun and am touched by the moonlight like all beings. I am nature herself, awake, powerful, resilient, generative, and loving. I offer the love of all my ancestors to your ancestors and the ancestors of all beings. I offer my presence like rain falling on the wise and unwise, the troubled and the untroubled, the just and the unjust, so that the wounds of time may be healed in the dance of the flow of birth and death. Since we began this weekend, my days and nights have been flooded by a river of tears, as may be the same for you. This year, a mighty river of tears. This history, our history, a river of tears, and many of us have died and drowned in this river whose contours were created by brutalizing colonialism, driven by greed, hatred, and ignorance, with economic, political, and cultural agenda. But we have not only died, we have also risen, embracing our mystery, depth, and greatness as true beings of this earth. Yes, I am in America. I was birthed in these lands, now called America, but I am not of America. I am of the earth, and so are you. Until we understand that, we will remain lost in our depravity, lost in our barbarity toward one another, lost in almost the joy of unkindness that some of us have toward each other. I am not now, and you are not now, and we are not now, nor have we ever been disconnected from the mystery of our own internal spiritual life. Our dances and our songs and our movements, all acting out and releasing trauma. Once I began to study and put traumatic skills into practice and the understanding of mindfulness of the body, I realized why my mother shouted every Sunday at church. Actually, this morning, Peggy and I have been listening to Mahalia Jackson. Oh, I had a chance to meet her. I've been really lucky. I've had a chance to meet some remarkable humans. She's one of them. And we were listening to her this morning, singing the song, How I Got Over. How did we make it? We are already in possession, so to speak, of the healing energies that is in our bones, that we have inherited from this planet. So when I ask myself, healing the wounds of time, I have to also ask myself, whose time and whose wounds? So for me, the time is in the last 500 years of human history, the rise of colonial Western empire. Indigenous peoples, enslaved peoples, directly and indirectly with generational trauma transmitted from gene to gene. Barbarism. And it is not just the victims, though that's where we need to focus, because when we understand what has happened to others, this is something white supremacy has difficulty understanding in the mind, in the heart. Martin Luther King said it this way: if I am committed to holding you down with my foot on your neck, how far can you go? And we have now seen that face to face for anyone who's paying attention. Not only the victims are traumatized in our bodies and in our minds, I was struck by how many of the people who've been brutalized by law enforcement or civilians who thought they were some form of law enforcement had mental suffering. Well, you cannot have 400 years of what we had without mental suffering, or you're not human. Our very suffering is an indication of our humanity. How dare it be denied? But we live in a world, not only a country, we live in a world in which the myth of race is so powerful as a category of human status, a category of human intelligence, a category of human worth. These wounds are inside of all of us, not only the victims of this treachery and this terror that the brave and noble people presented to us yesterday with soil samples, with stories, with retaking back the narratives of our lives. And then not only the victim, there are the indigenous people here on this land who we pretend don't exist. How can we be healthy with such a lie in our minds, in our hearts? It can be overwhelming, I know, to see the slides we saw, to hear the stories we've heard, to experience our own heartbreak, our own shame, our own regret, our own possibility for healing and transformation. This truth of America's racial karma is not philosophical. It is about bodies and bones and lives. Human lives. I saw a great statement from a young person in Kenya recently who was 9 years old, and he was holding a poster that said, "I am of the earth, I belong on the earth." One of the questions about healing is not only the time frame we're thinking of, but what are we healing? And it's clearly evident that the damage we are experiencing is not simply external in our institutions, though it is powerfully there, in our economics, though it is powerfully there in our politics. Oh my, is it not powerfully evident that we here who think we are in America are still in a colonial framework of how we think about one another, of how we organize, of how we pursue the destiny of democracy, which is incompatible with a colonial mind and all of its frameworks and tools. The damage of the last 500 years in each of us, victim, witness, standing by in silence, colluding, celebrating death of other humans, feeling good about it, feeling pride about it. That is the saddest commentary I can think of about one's own humanity. And also the perpetrators. We must get here and understand the trauma of the perpetrator. The destabilization of what happens in your own nervous system when you take a life. When you build a system designed to take life. You do not escape the traumatic impacts. However, they are subtly buried in your own body. We're in a historic moment of breakdown and breakthrough across this world. People are out on the streets almost everywhere saying this is not sustainable. This is not justice. This is not wellness. And how can we pretend that's not happening? I'm just amazed at the human capacity for denial. which we can ground and anchor very well here in the land we call America. We've been shocked by a planetary virus. I hope we've been shocked. I had a friend who said to me, what if we looked at the virus and all its variants as a teacher? What would it be teaching us? Well, it'd be teaching us we're on one planet, which some of us still don't seem to get. It would be teaching us that what we see is not everything. What we hear is not all of reality. It is teaching us that we are part of a living system of visible and invisible beings that need to be respected. Our arrogance, human arrogance, which was one of the great engines of the colonial enterprise, just arrogance. The very idea that civilizations and peoples and cultures that have been around thousands and thousands of years had no value is insanity. It is insanity on several levels. I don't have time to go into here, but one of them is what we have missed. The talent, the creativity, the ingenuity, the imagination, the hearts full of love that have been destroyed. This shift we are in is planetary. It is not just in America. This is what I want to really say to you. We are in a worldwide awareness of cultural and racial reckoning I've never seen before in my life, and I never thought I would see, to be honest. But it is on around the planet. And what is it that's on? What is on is re-understanding, reaffirming, and recreating what it means to be a real human being, not a category of human being. And then taking that consciousness and redesigning our society in that direction. There's no reason for all of us to be sick, unwell, in fear. Our nervous systems are either right now in a dorsal state, meaning immobilized. We are frozen. We are numb. We can't seem to move forward. Let alone the pattern here in the racial karma of America of progress and kickback, progress and kickback. I have a chart of the last 400 years. Progress and kickback. After Reconstruction, the KKK. After Barack Obama, we have what we have. And most recently, January 6th. We must understand what we're dealing with here. And what is it we're dealing with? We are dealing with a part of human consciousness that is so skillful that it convinces us we are separate. And in Buddhist terms, we have turned race into a separate self, as if it exists all on its own with no connections to anything, as if there's some essence inside my skin. There is. It's the essence of heaven and earth. We are in a shift. Some people say is akin to moving from single-cell organism to multi-cell organism. And in some ways, that's a great way, a metaphor, to look at what's happening in the U.S. today. 30% of us do not want to shift from a single cell perception of who and what we are. But it's not just the reluctance to move in that direction. All change is difficult. What I've discovered in my life so far, even if it's my idea, it's difficult to change. And so we have to create openness in ourselves to change so that our human capacity for change can come to the full. Right now, we're so preoccupied with our sympathetic nervous system in the light of this craziness of this society. We keep running between either I'm immobilized, I'm hiding, or I'm fighting, or I'm running away. And fighting and running away, which is built into our nervous system for safety and protection. This hiding like a turtle, this withdrawing, is also built into our nervous system for protection and safety. But those two states of being in us are not capable of change. Only when we get to the next level of our nervous system, the ventral vagus aspect of our nervous system, which meditation nourishes, which dance nourishes, art nourishes, music nourishes, literature nourishes, will we create the space in ourselves to hear one another? See, in the mental state, in the emotional state of the sympathetic nervous system, we cannot even listen to one another because we can barely hear ourselves screaming with our insecurity, our pain, our sorrow. The profound stress we are under right now, maybe no humans have ever experienced. We have a combination, a mixture of yearning, as many voices and faces call for wellness, justice, and a non-colonial social psychology of who and what we are and how to be together. I am not surprised it's so difficult for us to be together because we have been trained and conditioned not to be. We must understand this. Our situation didn't just happen. It happened over time. Institution by institution, reinforcing the trauma, reactivating the trauma in us all. And so we get caught. And it's not that we escape the experience of trauma in human life. It is learning how to deal with it skillfully, which many of us have never been trained how to be or do or know. We don't even understand how our nervous systems work. Many of us know more about characters on soap operas than we do about our own body. I'm convinced that the key to the way forward in the race matter has to begin with the cultivation of safety. I'm talking about the area of our body's function below the cognitive function. I'm talking about our primitive function of survival. And right now, as has ever been, our primitive function of survival in America is on hypervigilance. We're scared all the time. There's a line from Morgan Freeman in a movie with Tim Robbins. It's a terrible thing to live in fear. But our whole culture lives in psychic fear. Fear of ourselves, fear of one another. And that is the first step of healing, is learning how to create safety in ourselves and how to create safety among ourselves and create safety between ourselves. It can be done. None of us would even exist now if our ancestors intuitively and culturally hadn't figured out how to do some of this. So we have resources, people. We have tools. The issue is whether our consciousness and our choices are willing to do the work. In neuroscientific language, what I'm saying to you is we need to take control consciously of our own neuroplasticity, our own brain and body's capacity to adapt and to change, which is influenced by whatever thoughts we have the speech we use, and the actions we take with our body are all instantly actions in our neural network. And the more often we use that thought, the more often we use that speech, the more often we use that behavior, it becomes a pathway in our nervous system that is the foundation for habit. So we have to look at our habits of being together and our habits of not being together, so that we become clear of what damage has been done to us. And this is an ongoing journey. There's always damage in the human journey, but also the possibility of liberation is always there. I want to call your attention to that liberated possibility. Each of us has 1,000 capabilities inside of us, granted by our thousands of years of ancestors. What if we actually embraced our gifts and talents in deeper ways, more meaningful ways, and learn how to share these gifts and talents in ways we never conceived of with one another? I firmly am convinced that the key to the future of this planet is people. Because when I study history, what I have learned is that human consciousness shifts faster than institutions. And so if we want different institutions, we have to be different. With ourselves as individuals, we have to be different with one another, or we will continue to be tricked by the colonial framework of fight or flight, which places us back in the same situation where we began. You see, the police know exactly what to do. I know exactly what's going to happen when a black person is killed. There'll be a protest, there'll be law. It's a bad movie we just keep playing over and over again like we enjoy this. And so if we don't enjoy this, we need to come into voice. We need to hold accountability with ourselves, with one another, and with our institutions. We know now scientifically that the mind influences the body, and the body influences the mind. So let's activate these 1,000 capacities, many of which you already are in touch with in yourself, many of which you may not be in touch with in yourself. In order for this to occur, for me, we have to cross mercy's bridge. And that bridge for me begins with the question. I use a New Testament example that's coming up for me, a Jesus story, so to speak. Jesus was out walking along, which he spent a lot of time doing, and he came to like what we would call now a spa or a hot spring, where people gathered. And there was a man laying by the pool. You can look it up. And Jesus came up to him and said, what's wrong? What's your difficulty? And the man said, oh, I've been here 38 years and nobody will help me. My bed's all smelly. I'm trying to get in the water. I don't know what to do. Jesus looked at him and said, do you really want to get well? That's the first question for America. It is not clear to me we have said yes. Do we really want to get well with our racialized consciousness and institutional treachery around race? Do we really want to heal? This is the first question. The next question for me is, how deep do we want to heal? Do we want to heal on the surface so we can be polite? I think healing on the surface where we could be polite is great. and very important. But what I know is that politeness can't be sustained unless that actually is embodied at a deeper level. And another way to say this, we cannot have justice outside of ourselves if we don't have justice inside of ourselves. We are not capable of recognizing our own injustice and justice patterns in each of us, whether that's in our family, in our neighborhood, wherever this shows up. I'm simply trying to say you can't give what you ain't got. And so the work for me is accessing the capacities of our human nervous system to create safety and to rewire our brains and our nervous system pathways toward resilience, mental health, wisdom, and deep care and love for one another. We can be trained. We're trained in all kinds of things. But humanity, especially here in America, has been profoundly trained in violence. Even though for years many people have tried to train us in nonviolence, which many of us have learned, appreciate, and embodied, we still have this psychic field here in this land in which violence is a solution. Vengeance is a solution. Instability, if you are in power, means you can get away with anything. This does not bode well for the future, to be honest. I was recently asked, do I have doubt in the future? No, because the future is not present. What is present is here and now. And here and now, I have no doubt. I know we can be healed because I am healed and still healing. I appreciate Jesus' comment to the man by the pool. Okay, get up, pick up your bed, and walk. Don't pretend the past didn't happen. Pick it up. Look into it. Release yourself from its chains, its trauma. But we cannot go forward without the past because we wouldn't be here without the past. It is so clear. There's a great section in one of the important texts in Buddhism, the Lotus Sutra. And it has a great story in one of its chapters. I think it's the 15th chapter. And the Buddha's in meditation, along with other practitioners, sometimes called bodhisattva, or wise, compassionate persons, in fact. And bodhisattvas, or wise, compassionate beings from other planets, came to visit the group, saying, we've been looking at the earth. We think you may need some help. and the response from the Buddha is that bodhisattvas, loving and caring people, beings, are rising from the earth. We have enough here to heal and care for us all, if we put our hearts and minds to it. And this will require change. And then once you change, it will require more change. That's how it works. That's how history works. That's how life works. So even in the mud of our present situation, bodhisattvas, caring persons, are rising up from the earth. Understanding they are earthlings, not caught in some framework of false identity. So in order to do this healing, we must continuously train ourselves to come home to our nervous systems, come home to our bodies, not just our heads. One of the most dangerous things that has occurred, in my view, of practice is, in the colonial framework, is the idea that I think, therefore I am. From a Buddhist perspective and my own experience, when I think, therefore I am not. And what am I not? I am not present to what is happening in the moment. That's what the not is. I take a walk where I live back and forth here every day, and I notice if I'm thinking, I don't see other things. I literally don't see some things. I miss the lemon tree that's blooming. I miss the dog across the street on the balcony watching me walk. I miss the clouds. I miss the breeze of the ocean far away, but I can feel it when I slow down. When I am able to fall into silence and be aware of my eyes, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind in this vibrancy of the precious planet on which we live. So for me, the task for all of us who wish to is to process our consciousness to a deeper level. And what level is that? That is the level of consciousness where self-conceit lives. That is the ground of racism. And I could go, that's also the ground of male-centeredness, the ground of this, the ground of that. But I'm talking about this in terms of race. This self-conceit, this assumption that I and I alone have meaning. And so the work is to engage that consciousness in a journey of healing and transformation. Simply reacting to that consciousness will not suffice. Thinking about that will not suffice. We literally have to go deep into our own nervous systems, to our neuroceptivity, and learn how to be safe within. And then, as we do that, we can learn how to be safe between us and among us. That is the work. Our capacities are stuck. How do I know this? In 1970, I was part of a team on a faculty at the Ecumenical Institute in Chicago, and we had a class, a conference on white racism and Black heritage. And I was learning as a new faculty member, and I walked into the room where everyone was. We had like 50% Black and white. I walked into the room. I was there 30 seconds. I knew it wasn't going to work. And what I mean by that is I could feel our nervous systems in such stress, such fear, such anger, such shame. None of us could hear each other or talk to each other like human beings. And so for me, we have to go deep. And it's not just that we are trying to recover what we have lost. To me, what's exciting about all this is we can invent ourselves. We can literally create, as we do every day, what it means to think like a planetary human, what it means to speak like humans who live on a precious planet, what it means to be present with our actions, with our bodies, with our money, with our time. For me, without a planetary approach to our racialized consciousness, it will not change at a deep enough level. I've had the pleasure of living and working in many places around the world, and I assure you, every place I've been, being Black was an issue, consciously or unconsciously. Either in terms of the stereotypes people had who thought, I was a musician or a sportscaster or a sports figure or whatever, these projections we have of one another. I was asked a question recently by someone, what is my view of equality? Well, I have two things to say about that. One is our history, our American history, has focused on non-white people gaining equality, while white people focused on gaining equity. And now it's all come to roost. There are consequences for human behavior. We're having difficulty with just the pandemic with understanding reality in that way. Choices we make, patterns we create, stories we believe and transmit have serious life and death consequences for each other and for this planet and every species on it. So learning to come home to ourselves. I practice mindfulness in many ways in order to stay in touch with Larry. So in the middle of yesterday's process with you, my fury rose. Just my fury at the inconceivable nature of this insanity. But fortunately, I know how to embrace my fury so it doesn't spill out on you. This is what we must learn to do. Learn how to embrace our fear, work with our fear so it doesn't spill out onto one another. Our unconscious body messages, as well as our conscious ones, contribute to whether or not we feel safe. And if we felt safe, I say to myself, in this land, why would we have what we have for security? I've never been in a more secure place in which I felt unsafe. Isn't that interesting? Alarms, guns, I mean, it's just our nervous system is not settled into this space. Many people are caught in the fear of the settler occupying someone else's space. Somewhere in your bones, you feel that fear of retaliation coming over the hill. I actually heard a man in Colorado who says, I get up every morning at 7 o'clock with my AK-47 waiting on black and brown people to come over the hill to take my house. And I heard that, and my immediate thought was, well, who the hell wants to live next to you? You're a dangerous human being. I hope you get some care. I mean, how our mental illness is all wrapped up, our mental instability, our emotional capabilities to be calm, to be centered, to be respectful is what's at stake. Because without that, whatever social systems we build will be built with the deficits of ourselves. And we are more than deficits. My internal life, my spiritual life is not confined by these chains. I am larger than this. Always have been. Always will be. And these chains are not just external, they are internal. The damage to our nervous systems, the damage to our minds. And because we have mirror neurons as a part of our evolutionary makeup, I can't experience fear without it spilling out on you. And you can't experience fear without it spilling out on me. But the same is true for safety. The same is true for care. The same is true for love. We have to rewire our brains and nervous systems so that love and care become more dominant than greed and hate. That's personal work, but it's also collective work, which you are doing. And I'm honored and grateful to be a part of this process. This journey of rewiring ourselves and releasing and discovering untapped capacities in us is how we heal. So that the sacred dance between our heartbeat and the heartbeat of the earth itself can flow with joy. Whether we're in a city or a town or a classroom or in the kitchen, at home or in a protest or a hike, or sitting in the forest in contemplation of the wonder of the world itself. These kinds of activities are very, very important in nourishing our capacity to heal. I have a list for myself. I'll just read it. Every day I work on creating space for change in myself. I start the day with various kinds of meditations, but especially including sitting outside, listening to the sounds of nature near where I am. I highly recommend developing a more deep relationship with nature. I read a quote yesterday that said, well, you know, if you talk to birds and other creatures, they will talk back. And if you don't, they won't. And I've had the pattern of talking to creatures of all kinds and all the time. And so I've often had people ask me, who are you talking to? So I was just having a chat with a hummingbird. And they talk back. We have got to understand we are living on a living planet. And we are precious living beings, all connected by an invisible thread of wonder and mystery. Why would we want to live with less consciousness than that? Less joy than that? Less connection than that? I'm continue to study the human nervous system and recognize my own triggers and activations and how I respond to the suffering of race. I know how to practice when I get activated, where my anger rises or my fury rises or my heartbreak rises or my sadness rises. And the practice of mindfulness is not about not having them rise. It is in fact the reverse. It is to have my heartbreak rise so I can touch it. To have my fear rise so I can understand it, recognize it, and not have it take over my life. And the same with every state of being. Learning how to return to a sense of well-being in ourselves in the midst of our chaos. When we lived in Taos, New Mexico, we had a small rose bush, and it was a part of my daily meditation. And one of the things I noticed is the rose bush had the capacity of deconstruction and reconstruction at the same time. Parts of the rose bush were passing away and parts of the rose bush were rising. This is how we must look at our circumstance, our situation, our possibility. And beloved community, spoken about yesterday, the experience of beloved community is at the foundation of our healing and transformation. I mentioned Mahalia Jackson, how I got over her song this morning. We got over by staying in touch with beloved community as an experience of being together in peace and joy, in creativity, in anguish and tears, all hell by love. This is the practice of transforming within so we can transform without. Ending quote for you from James Baldwin. We've got to be clear-headed about human beings as possible because we are still each other's only hope.